Welcome. High Vibe Art and Soul with Catherine, a podcast to explore higher visions. Reach out and connect with wisdom seekers and wisdom speakers. No medical advice is being offered on any of these podcasts. If you require medical advice, please seek your healthcare practitioner. We'll do some education, some philosophy, perhaps a little political discussion and social issues, raising vibes, raising consciousness, expanding visions, expanding awareness, exploring art and why we need to, love to, desire to create art in all its forms, connecting mind, body, and spirit as we dig deep to reveal diamonds from life's journey. Join me, Catherine Whalen-Costin, as I share my insights, queries, and also delightful guests whenever possible to help me explore higher visions. If you're curious about future guests and topics, please go to the website claritywhisperartandsoul.com, where you will find my art store featuring energy-infused original paintings you can purchase, merchandise with prints from my latest art, my blog, and of course, my new ebook, just being released in 2022, Permission to Breathe, a memoir, sacred journey mining the depths of grief and trauma to unearth the gems beneath. As I'm releasing this new book in 2022, I will be exploring more about grief, trauma, and insights I've gained during the course of this podcast series. Let's do it. Let's get into this show right now.
It's February 1st, and I am Catherine Whalen-Costin. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, like, all that jazz. I just really actually wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about what's happening with the channel, because I'm sure for those of you who've been following, it was Let's Get Real chatting with Catherine for some time, and then I started into the art, and so now it's sort of a lot of different things. And I have a lot of things on the go, and I'm super excited to be sharing with you because it's February 2022, February 1st. Tomorrow's the 2nd, which is going to be really cool energy if you follow numerology, which I'm not an expert, but I do follow it somewhat. And this is big, exciting energy, and at least it feels that way to me. And I know that the channel looks different, and I wanted to just take a moment to say to you, I'm not going to start an individual channel for all my different endeavors, because a lot of you like a lot of the different things I'm doing. So I decided just to create playlists. So if you're not interested in the art aspect, you're interested in the podcast discussions, High Vibe Art and Soul is my new podcast, which I started. Instead of continuing Let's Get Real chatting with Catherine, it felt like time for a new podcast.
So let's get into today's podcast, High Vibe Art and Soul with Catherine. And I'm super excited to be chatting with you. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, you're probably wondering what I was talking about. But because I have the podcast on the YouTube channel as well as on the audio on the Apple, I wanted to address the issue of the expansion that is going on the YouTube channel through all my various endeavors. But today's topic is fear. Mind your own. Mind your own fear. And I really wanted to get into this because it was a big part of my journey through my traumatic experiences. I spent a lot of my life responding to other people's fears and not actually feeling my own very much. And trauma will do that to you when you are conditioned repeatedly that there's something's going to happen. You just don't know when. So you have to be constantly in you're constantly in survival mode because you're looking for threats all the time. And your body is trained to feel for threats. So you're picking up on the energy around you. In particular, when you're an empath, when you are highly sensitive, you're going to pick up on everyone else's energy. It's just going to be part of who you are until you learn how to keep your energy close to you so that you can actually hear it. so that you actually understand when a threat is real or imagined, an actual physical threat to your survival, like there's a fire or there's a great animal chasing you, that you can actually pick up on that. Sometimes, as in my case, that gets really numbed down because of various events. You can learn to, especially when it happens to you when you're young, a lot of traumatic events, and you kind of, I always called it like walking beside myself, so that I was more aware of other people's energy, people that I depended on, like my mother, for instance, because whatever I was picking up on her energy, it's you're connected to your mother, and on so many levels. And when you're a child, that and you only have a mother. In my case, when my father was dead, so I was totally dependent on her, and I knew that. I knew that mentally, emotionally, on every level. So learning to pick up on those messages around me became a real part of my survival skills, and I was very good at it. I learned to do it with everyone in my environment, whether it was at work, at home, play, wherever. So I could never turn it off. I never learned to relax. Didn't know the meaning of it, really. Sometimes I thought I was, but I'd hear people talk about going on vacation, and I never wanted to go on a vacation. Never. Because as soon as I was in a place away from home, I wouldn't have access to all of my tools to deal with all of the drama that was going to happen in my life. I couldn't be prepared. And it's really hard to live like that. But you don't usually know that you're living like that until something happens to shift your awareness. And I like to refer people to people like Dr. Gabor Mate's work, because he is really aware of what happens when you don't take care of yourself, when you have gone through very traumatic events, and then eventually the body says no, and you get sick, and because you can't keep functioning at that high adrenaline level. And this is a quote from me. I'm quoting myself here to you. Fear is an adrenaline factory. Don't let people use your fear as currency. Exploiting people through their fear is a very profitable endeavor for them. But if you use your adrenaline to create the life you want, not the one someone else wants, you're going to find it much more rewarding. But you don't know that you're doing that when you've been conditioned. And we've had a lot of conditioning, a lot of indoctrination on this planet to hype our fear, to keep us in chronic fear, really. And some people won't call it that, not fear, but stress. What is stress? You're fearing something. You're fearing, maybe you're fearing not having enough money, not enough food to eat, not a roof over your head. You're fearing a war in the horizon somewhere in the world. And when you're in that kind of fear all the time, you are just pumping adrenaline, because you have, 4 responses that are commonly known about fear: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we hear a lot about the people pleaser syndrome. Well, where does that come from? People pleasing, it's fawning. Why are you fawning? Because you're afraid of being rejected. You're afraid of being condemned. You're afraid of what will happen if you don't keep that other person happy, because that's how you were trained. That's how I was trained. I had to keep certain people happy. Otherwise, chaos, violence. Those are things that you learn as a child. So when people say children are resilient, I object to that. I object to that 100%, because children that's the human in the immature state. As we come into this world, we're adapting, we're learning, we're being taught by our environment. What is our environment teaching us? That is key. And we learn to cope when we don't have tools. We learn to adapt. We learn to people please. That is a survival skill. And people are just not aware of this. So often we think, oh, we can just shift that in our brain. We can just say, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. It's incredible how deep this stuff goes. And I highly recommend therapy. I highly recommend it with the right therapist. And you have to do your homework. You have to do your healing work so that you are not manipulated by your fear. Fear is so prevalent on this planet right now. And I should say it's obvious. It's so obvious that people are in fear by the behaviors, by the way, from whether it's leaders of companies, politicians, or the man or woman on the street. People are stressed. And it's this chronic fear of uncertainty. And I think the pandemic brought out a lot of that in people because they were forced to change habits, change behaviors, change the way you do things. And we know that when you're trying to change a habit, it takes a certain number of days to really make that habit stick. So, I just look at all the different things that have happened in the last 2 years I'm a big picture, little picture kind of person. I look at it from the individual and I look at it from the collective. And I see the different indoctrinations going on, conditioning. And it's something to be aware of. It's something to look at beyond the hype, the news, what other people are telling you to think. I really encourage people to do their own healing work. That's the key. Because as long as you've got the wounds and the triggers, people can use them. Now, if you look through history, every war that was ever fought was fought for someone's profit. Someone profited from that war, whether it was the person making the machinery, the person wanting to overthrow a government or take land or destroy people, whatever it was, there was a profit for some. But for the majority, there wasn't a profit. The majority usually pay the price. And you wonder how, and we hear this all the time, you wonder how could people have hurt other people? Like how could other people have been behind those things or got behind a regime or a mindset? We wonder how. But the truth is it's actually not, from my research, from my own personal experience, it's not that complicated. It's very simple. Someone is mining your fear and spending your fear currency, which is your adrenaline, your passion, your physical labor, your mindset, the works, in order to achieve their agenda, not yours. I mean, when you think about how long people generally live, that lifespan, you only have so much time to create, to experience, to explore, to, have joy in your life, to build things. And if you have to focus your attention because you're in fear all the time on someone else's agenda, you're not going to have much to actually build your own life. And I think this is critical to really, really think about it. When people want other people to go to war and to actually, kill for them, the biggest propaganda is to dehumanize. Because human beings don't want to kill other human beings, generally. And I'm sure I said this at the beginning, but I'll say it again. I am not a medical professional. I am not giving medical advice. So please, don't give me your comments on that. There are plenty of resources for people to explore that, but usually normal, healthy human beings do not have a will to kill another human being. We don't. Not for any reason. But if you believe wholeheartedly that other human beings, groups usually, are a threat to you and your family, your way of life, your country, your go on, then people can be recruited to those programs, let's say. That word program is really something. We we think we're freely going about in the world, but we're watching television programs. Think about that. So when I think about the fear that I experienced in my life and how it was used, my energy was used to fight someone else's battles, and how easily that happens. Because all I had to do was link it to my survival. If someone else wanted me to fight for them, as long as I believed it was my survival that was on the line, then I was absolutely going to fight with all my might. But I wasn't building, I wasn't taking care of myself, I wasn't able to create the things I wanted to, because my energy full on was dedicated to working to help alleviate whatever enemy that other person had. Help to make peace, help to stop suffering, help to create something that they wanted, not necessarily what I wanted. Because I didn't have time to think about what I wanted because I was in chronic stress. So when I had a break from dealing with their fears, I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted. So building and dreaming and imagining and writing and painting and all the things I do today, I wasn't able to do because I was constantly being told that I had something to fear. And you'll see that today with people forming groups, and here's an enemy, that person's your enemy, and that person's not your enemy. And if you don't join with a group and agree, then you'll be attacked for you're not taking this seriously enough. You're not, you should be afraid. You should really be afraid. Why? Why should I be afraid? That's the question I always ask myself. Is it a legitimate fear? Is it a where's the evidence? Where's the reality? Is my fear of my survival, is that what's on the line here, my survival? Or is it somebody actually just mining the fear they know that I likely have, because we all have it? So whether it's not that things that are happening in the world, we just sit back and say, oh, well, let them happen. But when you approach a situation when you're not in fear, you're going to make a way better choice, better decisions. You can actually imagine solutions far better than you can when you're in fear. Because you got fight, which all of the blood is rushing to your fighting muscles, not to your brain, your thinking conscious mind. If you're in freeze, you're not doing anything. If you're fawning, anything you are doing is to please someone else, to try to appease so that harm doesn't come. Doesn't mean you're doing the thing that you actually want to do or believe is the right thing to do even. But you will do it to fawn, to please, to pacify someone else that you think maybe is going to be violent or do something bad, or however you perceive it. So it's really important for us to look at our fear and look at it honestly and do our shadow work. Look at the parts of ourselves that are, wounded and that are, wish ill on others, or think it's okay for certain people to be attacked or destroyed or annihilated. I mean, some people, you don't realize that these are all little shadows playing inside of our psyche. And, we go about our lives pretending that they're not there, that only a monster can do terrible, terrible things, but that's not true. We know that. Human beings are capable of good and they're capable of evil. And the biggest part of this is how do we handle our fear? Why aren't we taught this when we're children? We aren't taught how to handle our fear. We are actually taught to fear in many cases, to fear authority, to fear nature, to fear all kinds of things that we would, if we hadn't, tried to destroy the indigenous spiritual connection to the earth, to Father Sky, Mother Earth, the rituals, the understanding. If we were more in harmony, we wouldn't fear it. We would understand the changes and shifts on the planet. If we were more connected with Mother Earth, we wouldn't have to fear it. And we would also be aware of our own actions so that we wouldn't be causing harm. But when we're out of touch, when we are out of touch with other human beings, and we're out of touch with our environment, which is it's the place it's planet, it's number one planet. We don't have a planet B. So to fear the planet that we live on, to fear other people, both of these, this idea, you fear something long enough, you will hate it. It is the easiest thing to get people to hate is to cause them to fear. If you fear it, you don't like that feeling. Nobody likes to be in constant stress and having that adrenaline rushing through you. I mean, there was a time in my life when I actually thought I did well on high adrenaline because I was so used to it. And when it wasn't there, I was exhausted. And I didn't understand that was my body's way of that was survival, to shut down, to stop. Because nobody can be pumping adrenaline like that all the time. And so I really, I share my story in my new book, Permission to Breathe, because it wasn't about the trauma. It was about the fact that it was never handled in an effective healing manner. It wasn't about the things that happen, and it never is. It's not what happens to us in life. It's what do we think it means? What do we think it means when we walk down the street and someone doesn't smile at us? There are times when we perceive that to be an insult. Oh, I was friendly and they didn't even look at me. We're making things have meaning that don't have meaning. Person might not even have seen you, might not recognize you, might have something else on their mind. So we have triggers, and we're being triggered daily about rules, about how we are in the world and how we're supposed to be. And when you get this volatile energy happening, people are not thinking, they're reacting. We all do this. I'm not trying to tell you something that is foreign. We know this about fear. We know it about trauma. And the thing about trauma is, it's very few people on this planet that haven't had some sort of trauma that can be mined by someone else. And the more trauma you've had, the more chronic, constant, like in my case, it wasn't just one event, it was one after another, after another. Some of it, just just like a low-grade fever, just always there. And so it was easy for people that selectively like to mine other people's trauma and their fear to fight their battles. And I really, this is where I really encourage people to, as we're healing, as we're shifting on the planet, many of you who will be listening to this show are aware from the many other shows I've done that we are shifting on this planet. We are moving into a higher vibration, and the faster we can get ourselves out of that low vibration of fear and hate and greed and into an awareness that there's an abundance on this planet, that there is enough, that there's more than enough. It's not that there isn't enough. It's never been that. It's simply that we've allowed certain people to hoard, we've put them on pedestals and allowed them to control the resources of the planet. And I don't think we did that knowingly. I think it was just I'm talking eons here. It's been going on for eons. So this isn't about just finding people to blame. And this is not about blaming rich people. That's ridiculous. Having money is a wonderful thing. And the more money you have, the more money you have for opportunities to do good. So it's never about the money. It doesn't matter whether you have $5 or $500 million. It's about what are you doing with it? What do you want to do with it? That's where we are off. We've become so off track. It's, people will say money's the root of all evil. Money has got nothing to do with it. It just doesn't. It doesn't matter whose hands it's in. Poverty is the root of all evil, as far as I'm concerned. And denying people their daily bread, there is where the evil comes in. It's the behavior. It's not money. And to be in survival mode all the time and looking for someone to blame for that feeling, because nobody likes it. And so there has to be a reason. We're always, as humans, we're trying to figure out why. Why do I feel this way? I feel this way because of what something happened to me 20 years ago. And you'll hear other people say, well, get over it. Well, that's not how it works. And so it's interesting when I recently watched a little video showing a polar bear. And the polar bear was being sedated. Sorry. The polar bear was being sedated so that the scientists, environmentalists were checking for, growth and how healthy it was and so forth. And they had the camera on him. And when they were done, they backed away. They left the camera on him. And he started to shake. And just like he was having convulsions or something. And how they explained it was that is a normal response to trauma for mammals, is to shake it off. And then he flipped over and got up and went about his business. He wasn't looking for revenge. He wasn't trying to find the guy who gave him the sedative. He was just going about his business. It was over. But humans don't get over our stuff. We don't know how to shake it off. We don't know that those things are so important. We hold it in our body because we spend a lot of time in our future mind and our past mind and not in our now mind. Because that's not something we've been taught very much, especially not in the Western culture, certainly not in my growing up. So when you have been indoctrinated and conditioned by trauma, you're always looking at the future based on the past. The last time I did this happened. I'm not going to do that again. So you become cautious about your world, cautious about the environment, cautious about people, relationships, everything. And so when you've got all that fear bottled up that you didn't shake off like the polar bear did, it is the perfect tool to, once it's sparked, it can be released like raging anger, hysterics, all those kinds of behaviors because it's got to be released. But we don't learn how to do it properly in healthy ways. Instead, it's almost like we're like a powder keg just waiting for that thing that's going to set us off. And sometimes people will mine that for war, to attack other people, to point to other people. The reason you don't feel good today is because of that person or that group of people, or that, there's always someone who's willing to tell you why you don't have the life you want. It's a politician's fault. It's the medical system. It's your parents. It's whatever. Someone who is, I will call, an exploiter will attempt to mine that. And there's lots of it out there. So be aware that, mine your own fear. Take care of yourself. Mine your memories, your experiences in a way that you heal, that you can use your experiences for good. And so that you don't have to stay in chronic fear. You don't have to stay in that very vulnerable state to be exploited. Nothing wrong with being vulnerable, but just make sure you're being vulnerable with people you can trust, and not just allowing yourself to feel safer because you're part of a group. And we know that through a lot of different experiments that have been done on groupthink, how dangerous that can be for the individual. The group, there are groups that have benefited from exploiting people's fear. And it's not a healthy way to live. It's not healthy, in my opinion. It's not healthy for society. It's not healthy for the individual. And I'm speaking from experience of living many years in fear, in various forms. And I didn't understand. I actually, I had someone say to me one time, "Oh my goodness," I said I was afraid of something. And they said, "Oh, I had no idea you were afraid of anything. You look fearless." And I thought, well, in a way, because that was part of my protection, because I wasn't really aware of my own fear or my own feelings of joy. I wasn't able to feel my own feelings. Instead, I was just really picking up on the energy around me. And I think we have a lot of empaths on this planet today. We have a lot of people who really want the new earth, who are really passionate about moving into the new earth, the golden age. We've been hearing about it for a long time, but the truth is, it's here. We have to open our eyes to see it. It's that saying, is it seeing is believing, or believing is seeing? And we are going to see a world that we believe in. That's what we're going to see always. So if you don't like the feeling of fear, if you don't want to be manipulated and exploited, pay attention and don't let other people's fears draw you in as their savior. As, if we don't all stand up together, these are slogans. We all stand together or we all fall. Anything worth having is worth fighting for. I don't believe that at all. There's so many things that are worth having, and you don't have to fight for them. Air, water. Nobody should be fighting for water. It is worth having. You don't have to fight for it to make it worth having. Fresh, clean water. That shouldn't be something we have to fight for. And but the mindset is that you have to fight for everything. And that's just how it's always been. There are people who say that all the time. That's just how it's always been. It's only been that way because we keep saying it. There are plenty of teachers out there, books, Spontaneous Evolution by Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's a pioneer in the field. He has brought forward more incredible information on epigenetics. There's been Dr. Joe Dispenza. There's been, I had people on my show that were part of the kinesiology conference. Dr. Charles Krebs, who healed himself. This is, and I think Joe Dispenza did this much the same thing. Anita Morjani. These are people who have done it. Years ago they used to say, "Oh, well, we don't know what it's like when people die because nobody's ever come back." People have come back. There's plenty of evidence, but we just, we kind of pretend that didn't happen. But it did happen. It happened to many people. And I know from my own mystical experiences that it's definitely happening. We're not dying. And that's our biggest fear, is of death. That's the survival thing. That's that trigger that if I don't do this, I'll die. I mean, when you may not say that initially, But if you chunk down all the other things, I'll lose my job. What does that mean? I won't be able to pay for my mortgage. What does that mean? I won't have a home over my head. What does that mean? I won't be able to buy food. What does that mean? I won't be able to take care of my family. We'll be living on the street. It's going to be cold. I'm going to freeze to death. My family's going to freeze to death. In the end, it comes down to my biggest fear is death for a lot of people. So look at it. Look it in the eye and say, where am I putting my energy today? And is my fear real? Is it, I mean, I know it's real. I feel it, right? I give you one more story that's interesting because it happened in my own life and it was really powerful. This wonderful woman who happened to be my mother, she really needed me throughout her life. And when she wasn't getting enough attention from me, she knew what my triggers were. And one of my triggers that had been imprinted on me when I was young was of storms. I was always felt, and I think it was in particular because I was so sensitive, that I would pick up on the energy in the environment. Like I could feel a storm coming. I could feel it, and it would start to get me agitated. And I would, then go check the weather. And then next thing you know, well, sure enough, a storm's coming. But just in case that wasn't enough, she would phone me and say, a storm's coming, batten down the hatches, you better get ready. Have you got are your kids in the house? Have you got enough supplies? Have you been looking at the weather? Do you know, is it coming right at you? Or things like that. Until I would be really hyped up. And then she would say things like, oh, you should be okay though. And so I would think, well, yeah, I probably will be, but I'm a lot worse now that you've called me and informed me of why I should be so afraid, really afraid. And excuse me. So this was an ongoing thing for years. And then I'd call her back, and so now she's getting 2 phone calls. She got the phone call to inform me, and now I'm phoning her back to see if she heard anything new, because now I'm really afraid and I'm worried about, what's going to happen. And she's my mother, and I'm worried about her. And is she safe? And is everything going to be all right? And when I would do that, then she would say, "Oh, it's going to be fine. Just calm down. Don't be ridiculous. That's ridiculous." So now I feel ashamed because I'm overreacting. But she's actually fanned the flames and created that energy exchange between us that, she's going to rescue me by telling me to calm down. She's warning me, so she cares about me. But these are not actual truths. None of it is. It's all about the same thing. This is an attempt, not an attempt, this is actually, it works. She gets my attention. She's probably just looked at the weather and thought, oh, I'll give her a call and see what's going on. And I play right into it because it's my trigger. It's my fear. I mean, as soon as she hits that trigger, boom, I'm off and going, right? So this went on like this for years. And finally I thought, well, this is ridiculous. And especially the more I got into my meditation processes and connected more with spirit and the elementals and the fairies and the angels and all that energy, and realized everything was energy. And I started to focus more on my own energy and started to get into my body, for one thing. And so that I was feeling my own feelings about things. And so it took practice. It took practice because you have to remember this habit of being triggered by my mother about storms was chronic. It happened throughout my life. So to change that, I had to start a new habit and see the evidence. And so I started, when I see a storm coming, I started looking at it on the radar and just blessing it and realizing I can't control the weather, but I can ask for, intervention. Not go into fear and attract it to me, because we do attract what we fear. There's a lot of energy there. It's like a magnet that just pulling stuff to us. So I would say to my guides, the angels, the earth, if this storm is not for my highest good, if I don't need to experience this, please take it up higher, away from the earth, away from the trees and the people and the animals, and so it doesn't cause any violence on the planet. If it's not necessary for my highest good to experience this, I would really love it if you would take it away. Redirect it higher and away from the planet, away from people, so it causes no harm. And then I let go. That's the key. Then I let go. I have to trust that, whatever's for my highest good is going to happen. And I let go. And it took practice. I can't say that in the beginning I'd go back and check the radar, check the outside, wander back and forth the windows, closing them, open them, on and on and on. But after I had several of these experiences where the storm just didn't come my way, just didn't. It just either dissolved right in the air, like it was like looking at the radar 1 minute and then looking again and it was gone. It was absolutely amazing. And I'm not the only one who's had those experiences. So I know that it is about trust. It is about our energy. It is about what we magnetize to us. And we do it consciously, subconsciously. We do it through our actions. We do it through our words. It is amazing to know how powerful we can be. So this podcast today is really about me sharing with you my experience with fear and realizing it's currency. It's currency for people to exploit if I allow it. And I don't fear my neighbor. And I don't fear other countries. I don't fear the weather. I'm not willing to give my energy to that anymore. I'm aware that my survival instinct is really good, and that if it's a true threat, I know what to do. I am prepared because I've prepared my entire life. And likely most of you have too, if you really think about it. Do you know what to do in an emergency? If you don't, then maybe check into that. But to allow yourself to be fearful of the unknown, fearful of death, fearful of, what's going to happen in a month or 2 months or whatever, or fearful of revisiting the things of the past. That is a lot of energy that you are expending. And if you're doing it for someone else, because someone else is triggering it, then you really are investing in something that's not going to give you a good return. Invest in yourself. Invest in the things you love. Invest in the world you want, not the one that you don't want. And from what I can see and what I've read, that old 3D duality and violence and hate, it's leaving. That oppression, that indoctrination, that patriarchal ideology, it's crumbling. And what we're witnessing is the last-ditch effort to try to attract people back into those old habits that never worked for us and weren't healthy and weren't fair. And now we're seeing an opportunity on planet Earth in 2022 for more harmony, more peace, more love, more generosity, more fairness, more equality. But we have to want that. We have to want that, and we have to direct our energy towards what we want. And that doesn't mean ignoring what's happening. You can be aware of what's happening without spending your own fear in it. You can be aware and not feed that fire, not put another log on a burning fire. We don't have to contribute to that. We can contribute to things that we love. We can share messages of love and the good that we see in the world. We do not have to allow ourselves to be taken in by our own fear or by other people's fear. So what I did with my mother is, once I learned that I didn't have to fear that anymore, I didn't have to fear Mother Nature, or all the changes on the planet. When my mother phoned, she did it a few times. There's a storm coming, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, it's not coming my way. What? I think it's coming your way. I said, no, it's not. And you know what? Most of the time, it did not. And if it did, it was much less than what was predicted. So she learned that that was not going to be my trigger. She was not going to get my attention that way. She was not going to be able to exploit it and use it. She had some other tools, but that one was pretty important to me, to realize that I needed to feel my own fear and be aware of what was triggering me so that I wasn't easily manipulated by others and exploited. I didn't like living on high adrenaline. It wasn't good for my body. It's not good for my heart, my brain, any of it. And not only that, while I was pouring all of that adrenaline into other people's fears, I wasn't building the life of my dreams. And now that's what I'm doing. And I want that for you too. I want that freedom, true freedom. Freedom is not just a word. Freedom comes with responsibility. And being responsible is totally different than being reactive. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. And I really hope that I've given you something to think about, something to research and look into and feel into and see where you're at with that, because I really think we can do better. And my intention when I started this podcast series, Let's Get Real Chatting with Catherine, back in 2012, it was about transforming fear to move us to freedom. And I find it interesting that I'm restarting it now, and it just feels so much better energy than it did in 2012. And even that 2012 was big energy. You know, we've had some big energy since then, and we'll continue to. If you follow any of the astrologers, they'll tell you this is going to be a magnificent year. And we are going to see turmoil and chaos and things like that. But it's about what we do with that energy. Do we play in that old energy of fight, of finding an enemy, of someone to blame, or do we choose to see, oh my gosh, spring is coming. It's, the seasons are changing. The water's running, the snow's falling, the rain's falling, whatever. The flowers are blooming. Plants are growing. Friendships are blossoming. Children are being born. Yes, there's good still in this world, and it's worth focusing on. So, thank you for listening, and until next time, take care. Thank you so much for joining me to explore and expand our consciousness and our awareness of life on planet Earth. It's been a pleasure. If you want more information on guests, on the book, Permission to Breathe, on my blog, on my art, go to claritywhisperartandsoul.com. All the social media links are there. And of course, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, it's very possible that I would love, love, love you to subscribe and to share and to like and to comment, because hearing back from you is what helps me to know where to go with the shows, what's inspiring you, what's intriguing for you. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful week. Take care.